Okay, so this project, Humour in the European Public Sphere, funded by the Una Europa EU funded. It's funded by an EU project called part of Una Europa. Okay, and it consists of the oldest universities in the EU. I underscore in the EU because it's one of the rules to be able to apply for funding. And so those universities are yours truly here in Bologna, Hiselinde Kuipers in Leuven, Wladek Chłopicki at the Jagiellonian in Krakow, Carmen Maitz Avelado, Madrid Complutense, and Juha Erkman from Helsinki. So we are the people who got the funding, but we've opened up our gates to participate in this project with just about every country in the EU and outside the EU that we can think of. So there you can see Jan from the Czech Republic. We have Estonia. We have Russia on my right here. We have the UK here and Italy here for the moment, plus Italy with Alberto Godioli, who works in Groningen in Holland. We have Romania, who's here this morning. We have Norway. We have Greece, Vili Tsakona. I can see you out there somewhere. We have Lithuania, Estonia, Belarus, Poland, of course, and other countries that I cannot remember at the moment. What we were going to look at initially when we won the funding in 2019, we started off thinking of using cartoons in a traveling exhibition. But then we were hit by the dreaded lurgy, COVID-19, and it was no longer possible for us to go around Europe with these beautiful materials. So we changed, and we are working on an electronic website on which we are placing not only cartoons, but any example of humour in the European public sphere. So we have things like memes, of course, internet memes. We have, what do you call them, plastic art, which is humorous. As I see Jan's face here, we'll see Jan's stuff next week. And so we're looking at just anything that's funny in intent that appears in the public sphere. So I'm now going to hand you over to Wladek, who is going to show us what we have so far of the website, and then he is going to introduce the four speakers. I'm last, by the way, forgot to tell you. Wladek, I'm last, by the way, but I'm perfectly able to introduce myself if that's a problem. And over to you.
No introduction needed.
No introduction needed. Okay, off you go.
Okay, thank you, Delia. Right, so I'll present to you very briefly the last minute news, which is the first version of the website that we have just received. So there it is. This is our logo, which might actually change later to various variants, but logo is maybe not essential here. This is the website. This is the planned first, the homepage of the website, which actually features Razvan's contributions here. Contribution I can see here, and Razvan is going to be presenting today. This is going to also feature some tags or categories. So we're gonna. These are just two examples, cartoon and negative attributes. So some humor mechanisms are going to be there, as well as humor genres, plus various other tags. Authors are going to be introduced here below with some avatars we are working on. These are the universities that contributed to this. Plus, there will be some further information. When you actually click on any of the contributions, this is going to what it's going to be look like. So the actual cartoon or meme or whatever other forms, and then three major comments here. What do we see here? Which public issue is being addressed? What does Humour do? So this is actually the advantage of this sort of format. It's going to be reasonably short, readable for general audience. There will be a bibliography as well. Plus, importantly, up here, which is not there yet, there will be a glossary of terms, which we're going to, well, try to define and bring closer. So whenever there'll be like hypertextual links here, right? So you can click on a cartoon, for example, and learn something about it, and then go back to all the cartoons which are available. So I think it's going to be a very nice website. I do recommend it to you. It's going to be called Humour in Public. That's one word, humourinpublic.eu. So this is just the provisional website. Right. So that's my brief introduction to what we've got here. This website will be publicized, I'm sure, certainly in a number of places, so you'll be able to have a look at this when it becomes public. Now there's a preview. So the presenters today are members of our project today, and next week are members of our project on humour in the European public sphere. So we've got 4 presenters, and the order of presentation is first we'll have Agata Hołobut from the Jagiellonian University of Krakow, professor of linguistics there. Then we'll follow up with Razvan Savtoiu from Transylvania University of Brasov, a professor there. Then the third speaker will be John Magnus Dahl, a researcher from the University of Bergen. And at the end, we'll have Dilia Chiaro from the University of Bologna. So let me then ask Agata Hołobut to take the floor with her contribution.
Thank you very much for having me here, and I hope I am audible and maybe also visible. Am I, by the way?
That's right. By the way, let me just say that if somebody wants to ask a question, it's most welcome. Following the contribution, you can ask question by raising your hand, and I'll ask you to speak, or you can send us the chat message as well, if you have access to that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So let me just share my screen right now. And as a word of introduction, I just wanted to say that the project I'm going to show to you today is not really the project that is going to find its way into the website, because Dilia has asked me to kind of rather spontaneously look at the uses of humour in the Polish public sphere connected to the issues that are quite disturbing and harrowing nowadays. That is the uses of humour in the public sphere in the context of the humanitarian crisis on the Polish-Belarusian border. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. As a word of introduction, simply to contextualize what I'm going to show and the cartoons that I'm going to focus on, I just wanted to say a few words about this current situation in Poland, which you must be familiar with. The situation is that right now the state of emergency has been declared in Poland because of the migrants being actually encouraged by the Belarusian regime to enter or to cross the Polish and European border. And the so-called exclusion zone being introduced or declared in Poland along the 400-kilometer long borderline. It is 3 kilometers wide, but the situation is as follows. This practically translates into NGO representatives
Now, Agata, we seem to have lost you, or is it just me?
No, I've lost her too.
Yeah,
Right.
me too.
It's not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same
I'm
here.
lost as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
Does this
just-
exclusion zone also stand for the internet as well?
No, well, luckily not. Luckily not.
Yeah.
Let me just try to reconnect to Agata. Just hold on a second. Okay. Sorry, there was an issue with the internet, sudden blackout, so she'll be coming back just in 1 minute. Sorry about this. We have to deal with this sort of situations.
Vladek, may I just interrupt a minute? Questions will be in these webinars are always at the end after all 4 speakers. So
Yes, that's
maybe
fine.
Agatha won't be able to take questions because she's got to rush off. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a comment about Belarusian KGB. Possibly, who knows? These sort of conspiracy theories are very familiar at this side of the Alp.
Oh,
Oh,
she's
there
back.
she
Here
is.
she is. Agatha,
There
There
she
she
is.
is. Right.
take it from the top.
I am here. I do apologize for those technical difficulties. I just got completely disconnected. But anyway, I'm just going to continue, and please forgive me for those difficulties. So I was trying to contextualize my presentation by narrating the rather complicated situation in Poland. And what I failed to mention, which is quite important to contextualize the cartoons that I'm going to show in a moment, is the fact that actually the Polish lawgivers have passed the bill deciding that actually 350 million euros are going to be invested in the building of this huge kind of border wall that would separate Poland from Belarus. And this is exactly what's going to feature quite prominently in the cartoons that I'm going to discuss in a second. I decided to focus on the artwork of one particular cartoonist that I truly appreciate, that is Jan Koza, who's a Polish established illustrator and animator, as well as social activist, because you will see quite clearly from his artwork that he's pretty deeply involved in what he's demonstrating, presenting in his satirical works. And he is associated with the biggest selling weekly in Poland, the center-left weekly called Polityka, but he also makes his works available online on his Facebook fan page. So basically his kind of artistic commentaries on the current state or situation in Poland are actually being made available to the readers of the print and online version of the magazine and to his followers on Facebook. So I just wanted to show to you a selection, a very brief selection of his artworks concerning the humanitarian crisis. And the first one that I wanted to comment on very briefly features the already mentioned wall. The visual component here is actually mostly dedicated to the representation of this huge brick wall that is somehow ridiculously being thermo-insulated by 2 construction workers. And you will actually notice that the visual component is quite simple and sketchy because this is Jan Koza's style. The caption above it it contains actually a play on words in Polish. I translated it very literally into the insulation of the Polish border wall is well underway or is in progress now. But in fact, the Polish shape of this caption, trwa ocieplanie muru, the word ocieplanie, which I translated in insulation, literally translates also into warming or warming up. And the ambiguity is as follows. We have a play on words here because this word is usually collocates with images of improving the image of something like an institution or the country, or warming up the relationships, for instance, international relationships. So when the viewers are confronted with this visual presentation, they immediately kind of realize the incongruity and the illogicality of the very enterprise of thermo-insulating a wall that stretches along a 400-kilometer border and that is supposed to kind of separate two countries. But obviously, this immediately, the ambiguity of the verbal component immediately invites them to, in a sense, read this visual image metaphorically. And when I try to analyze how I understand it, I think what I'm doing is I'm actually creating this conceptual blend where the diligent construction workers actually stand either for politicians and decision makers or for spin doctors, doing all they can in order to, in a sense, propagate the idea of this Poland's isolationist strategy in the face of the humanitarian crisis, as a way of ensuring national and international security. So in a sense, this is for me a metaphor of the propaganda effort on their part, with their being busy at work, standing for the efficiency and effectiveness of those efforts of handling, of how they handle the humanitarian crisis. The notion of thermo-insulation actually on the one hand standing or representing the promise to the Polish people of keeping them safe and ensuring not only a thermal but also as a psychological comfort by insulating them from this external threat that they are experiencing. On the other hand, the thermal insulation image can also be a mockery of this sense of quasi-humanitarian effort to make the migrants behind the wall maybe feel a little bit better, because maybe this is going to protect them against the wind while being stranded in the middle of the forest. So this verbal visual composition encourages quite complex or complicated conceptual processes or mechanisms of blending on the part of the viewers, obviously encouraging in a very indirect way reflection on the ethics of the way in which the humanitarian crisis is being handled in Poland. And the image of the wall actually features quite prominently in many of the cartoons that Janek Koza is producing. I will not mention or I will not comment on many of them. Instead, I will just show one more artwork on his part, which is actually a two-panel cartoon, which at the visual level conveys quite a simple message. It was actually published online and in the print magazine on the 23rd of August, so a few months ago. In the first panel, we see this very simplified presentation of a smiling figure and two potentially policemen or border guards carrying something that looks like helper gifts. The first person smiling. We can assume this is probably a politician posing in front of the cameras and kind of enthusiastically trying to be helpful and sensitive to the problems of people in need. To the right, we have the image of a group of figures, possibly the migrants behind the barbed wire fence, and the rather kind of provocative caption reads, to the left, humanitarian aid has arrived, and to the right, but found no humans in the area or no humans there. So what Koza makes or encourages us as the viewers to do is, first of all, accomplish this rather uneasy mental transfer, forcing the readers to adopt the points of view, ironically, the points of view that are certainly not their own, assuming that the readers of Politica Weekly and the readers of his fan page share his beliefs and his convictions. So what they need to do is they need to somehow resolve the incongruity between the blatant assertion of no human presence in the area that is being expressed by the verbal component and the visual evidence that is presented to them in the right-hand corner, in the right panel. So obviously, if there is anything humorous about it, and I believe there is, just in like in the previous examples, it is the mechanism of actually helping the readers realize that they have been manipulated, ironically manipulated, into adopting the points of view that are completely anti-humanitarian and not their own, and somehow imagining the reversed viewpoint, the reversed axiology that is abhorrent to them. So in a sense, the butt of this joke, or the object of this well, joke, if we can call it a joke, humor, is obviously the hypocrisy of the politicians and decision makers who pretend to care but actually ignore the needs of people who are suffering behind the border. And the same mechanism would be actually used in the last cartoon that I wanted to show, presenting something that looks like military training, with the instructor actually saying in this speech bubble, today we will learn how to recognize a human being. And again, the same mechanism is used by Koza, or the implicature that the reader gets from the utterance of the instructor is in itself stunning and hard to accept. The fact that actually the very automatic and inherent capacity of each and every human being of recognizing other human beings, if it actually needs some kind of external instruction and training, it probably means that the notion of humanity must have been somehow redefined and needs to be explained anew under completely different circumstances. So to sum up, what I found in those examples of the use of humor in the Polish public sphere related to the humanitarian crisis on the border, what is characteristic of Janek Koza is kind of employing very complicated mechanisms of irony, metaphorical and conceptual blending, using pun in order to encourage rather complex interpretive processes on the part of the viewers, and actually inspiring reflection on the ethics and on the ethics of the current situation, and also on as if the Polish identity is being called into question by the current situation. So this is basically all from me. Thank you very much, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Agata, for this very interesting talk. Very timely and topical. I suppose questions could be asked to Agata in the form of a chat, and I suppose I'll need to handle them or pass them on to Agata, as she needs to leave us very soon.
I do apologize for this, by the way.
Okay, thank you very much. So now the floor is, I'll give the floor to Razvan Savtoi from Transylvania University in Brașov in Romania to present his contribution to the UNA project.
Thank you, Vladek, and all the people who are here. Let's see if this works as earlier. Can you see the first slide?
Yes,
okay, because I don't have the screen with the rest of the participants. So thank you, Vladek, for sharing the website and taking the time to insert these cartoons that I will present right now. After Agata's presentation, which is connected with what's going on in Europe right now, I will move just a little bit in the past, in 2018, in the summer of 2018 when a Romanian tennis player, Simona Halep, who was for quite a long time, 1 year or so, #1 in the WTA for the Women's Tennis Association. So Simona Halep became the second Romanian tennis player to win a Grand Slam title at Roland Garros, after another Romanian, Virginia Ruzic, who was successful in 1978 at the same tennis tournament. After only 5 days after this event, on June 14, Charlie Hebdo, the French satirical magazine, published this cartoon, and it was also distributed by Dan Alexe, a Romanian journalist and writer. The original cartoon goes, a Romanian woman wins Roland Garros, and in the as a bubble from the mouth of the winner, it's scrap iron, scrap iron. Apparently, this cartoon may seem just, let's say, a cartoon and that's it. But Romanians and Romanian newspapers and magazines reacted. The cartoon in Charlie Hebdo does not actually include the name of the winner, as you can see, but it can be easily decoded in the context of the events presented earlier. It's a woman tennis player holding a trophy while happily shouting, "Scrap iron, scrap iron." There is here, one can identify here 2 main ethnic stereotypes. On the one hand, it's the Roma population, Romani or gypsies, who are associated with stealing, usually metal from construction sites and copper from the railway, to be sold for money because of poverty. On the other hand, a high percentage of French people hold unfavorable views of Romani gypsies and associate Romanians with the gypsies. Thus, Romanians are associated with stealing. So what Romanians interpreted in this cartoon is, in fact, let's say, the association from the stereotype, the gypsies are poor and they only steal. And that is why they started to create a kind of dialogue, as I wrote here on the slide, cartoons in dialogue. For example, this second cartoon by a Romanian cartoonist, Lucian Amari, who signs as Jup, goes like this. On the left, a caricature from Charlie Hebdo about Simona Halep and the text on the billboard, "Scrap iron," which is translated into Romanian this time. And on the right, the man who is standing with his arms akimbo and is frowning at the translated version of the cartoon, says, "Aha, so the French crooks gave themselves away. The cup is not made of silver as it should be, but of iron." This time, the name of the woman tennis player is explicit, unlike the Charlie Hebdo original cartoon. And the text is given in Romanian, not in French. Thus, in his comment, the man starts from the premise that the tennis player is actually telling the truth about the cup and foregrounds a different stereotype. French are deceptive, or French are liars. This cartoon can also be interpreted in the key of ethnic humor. On the one hand, it is Romanians who tend to appreciate the Western world and at the same time suffer from what Dan Alexe called resentful superiority. There is even one common line among Romanian people saying that Romania is an island of Latinity in a sea of Slavs. So superiority of surviving among Slavic nations. On the other hand, it's the French who are satired in this cartoon, as I said earlier, as they are presented as being deceptive and liars. In the meantime, I also looked for other cartoons in dialogue, and I found this one, which is not actually a cartoon, but as you can see, it's a print screen from a Romanian TV station, and it's a message which was printed on the presenter's T-shirt. It's like an answer to the original cartoon, saying that you have the biggest iron thanks to a Romanian. So they use the same ferai as in the original cartoon, and the earlier theory of resentful superiority is again at stake here, since it appears that a Romanian engineer was in fact the one who gave Gustave Eiffel the idea of how to build the tower from Paris. And what is more, another story is that the entire iron for the tower came from Romania, from a city called Reșița. So unlike in the previous let's say cartoon, here iron becomes the central topic instead of the success of the tennis player. As a conclusion, I think these cartoons are part of a dialogic action game, since they build on the same type of humor and target population at large. Since the title was satire in multiple layers, it is this specific procedure which is used both in the Charlie Hebdo cartoon and in the Romanian answer. On the one hand, the original cartoon aims at making the French aware of diversity and acceptance. On the other, the Romanian cartoon aims at making Romanians aware of their sometimes changing attitude towards others. I'll stop here and wait for questions and comments at the end of the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rezvan. This was quite an interesting contribution. This dialogue idea actually is something fascinating. How much elements it involves, and stereotypes and everything else. As a linguist, I'm quite interested in this sort of thing. But we can have the discussion after this afterwards.
Sure.
So now is the turn of John Dahl from the University of Bergen. All right, hi John again.
Hi, thank you.
Right, so the floor is yours for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me and inviting me to this. I will discuss a cartoon that you see here that got published in the Norwegian newspaper Dagbladet in 2018. Dagbladet is what we in Norway call a schizophrenic tabloid, meaning that it combines tabloid journalism with serious journalism, especially for Dagbladet's cause in the field of culture. And the occasion when this was published was together with a commentary on international politics, more specific on new nation state law in Israel, which states that Israel should be a predominantly or a Jewish nation. And this is then commented on. What this specifically comments is part where this was criticized by the Druze minority in Israel. And the Druze, and what we can see here, as you all probably see, is that Benjamin Netanyahu, then prime minister in Israel, is kicking or boxing, a Druze man in quite stereotypical depiction of a Druze man out from a bench, which is marked with whites only, which of course is a reference both to segregated US before the 60s and also a reference to apartheid South Africa. And of course, Netanyahu's body is formed like a swastika. And this sparked international humor controversy, perhaps a minor one, but still international. What happened was that the Israeli ambassador to Norway filed a formal complaint to the press ethics board, which is an organization owned by the press in Norway itself, independent from the state. But it also got international attention, for example, in Haaretz, the left-leaning newspaper in Israel, and Allgemeine, the larger Jewish American newspapers. And the European Jewish Congress reacted and said that this is classical anti-Semitism, according to the HRA's working definition of anti-Semitism, because it associates Jewish politicians with the Nazi regime, and it's just not legitimate political criticism. I think there are two things that are especially interesting here when it comes to this controversy, and one is that it, to some degrees, very similar the, let's say, ordinary humor controversy in Norway. Because the local actors that started to get mobilized after the Israeli ambassador had reacted on this and filed a complaint can be termed as the usual suspects. They were people from different organizations against racism, like, for example, Anti-Racist Center. It was a researcher formerly affiliated with the Holocaust Center in Oslo, and it was some right-wing intellectuals working at Civita, which is the right-wing liberal think tank. They were all criticizing this cartoon and saying that it's clearly anti-Semitic, and that's quite normal in Norwegian humor controversies, which tend to be about race and ethnicity, or anti-Semitism, as in this case. On the other hand, the press itself, Dagbladet, for example, but also the head of the Norwegian press organization, Kjersti Stavrum, were all quite univocal in their defense of this cartoon, and it was in quite principled matters, like, cartoons have a freedom to transgress, they have a freedom to offend, and they have a freedom to have representations and do things that you cannot do in ordinary and serious discourse. And the story ended, of course, with Dagbladet being acquitted in the PFU, in the Press Complaint Board, for not having breached press ethics. So in one way, this was a repetition of the normal story. Let's say someone is reacting on a way of some kind of ethnic humor and get criticized by interest group for that are the same interest group as always. It would be the Anti-Racist Center, for example. In this case, it was also MIFF, that's short for With Israel for Peace, Norwegian group, a Christian pro-Israel group that tend to react when some anti-Semitic causes comes up. And on the other hand, the press organization itself would come with arguments about freedom of speech, and this is freedom of speech and should just be allowed, and we should especially protect cartoons. On the other hand, this was different because this was an international crisis as well. As we can see here, this is the European Jewish Congress in their own website, AJC in the media, that reported that they got quoted in the Allgemeiner about this newspaper, together with many other international Jewish organizations. And of course, it was also a matter of international and European, close European politics, since the embassy themselves complained about this matter. So there were some kind of international dimension here that is not very common in the typical Norwegian humor controversy. And we can also see it was directly connected to the states, as Israel itself was involved. Norwegian authorities did, however, not comment on this, at least not publicly. And this was, and also there is some ambiguity here, since this, of course, was cartoon of a politician, and was thus very much defended as being an important contribution, an important piece of humor, an important piece of criticism, because it's criticizing a politician and a concrete policy. An opposition to this can be seen in a later sketch that was made by the NRK. This was very short-lived. This was an animated sketch that was live maybe for 4 or 5 hours. As we can see, it depicts a very stereotypized Orthodox Jewish man playing Scrabble, and his partner, who was not depicted as stereotypical Jewish, has this board that you can see here ready. And then, and apologies here for offensive language, this is the Norwegian translation of Judenschwein, which of course is a very, a slur with Nazi roots. The joke here is, of course, that if he would lay this these letters down, he would get very many points in the Scrabble game and probably win it all. As a contrast from this sketch to this again, this letter that came some years later, late 2019, got a much more critical reaction univocally, that this is clearly anti-Semitism, this is stereotypical, this is slur, this should be taken down. It wasn't defended by almost anyone, and it was indeed taken down after just some hours. While this gained a much more appreciation and a fundamental defense, as it's a way of criticizing politicians. With one very interesting exception, and that was the head of the Jewish religious community in Norway, the Mosaic community. He was very critical to this cartoon, because he said he would argue that this is a specific way to sneak in anti-Semitic tropes inside political criticism and inside political criticism of Israel, which is quite legitimate in Norway across the political spectrum. And thus, this is worse than many other kinds of anti-Semitic content. He was not as critical to this. He tried to say, he's clearly said, this is bad taste, but he also tried to make a joke about Jews playing Scrabble and having a sense of humor that was a bit, I don't think the joke landed as well, but he didn't react in the same way as this. So there is some complexity here in the mix of ethnic stereotypes, of anti-Semitism, and how different actors get mobilized in in humor controversies that I think are quite interesting, and that I hope we can discuss a little bit later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was an excellent example. I love the idea that all presenters so far have been talking about complexity. How nice. So we can take this subject up later and discuss about the notion of offense, right? How does it relate to complexity, and how does it relate to certain elements of language or certain stereotypes or certain international conflicts. Right, so now the time is ripe for our convener, which is Delia Chiaro from the University of Bologna. I hope Delia is there somewhere to be able to present. Okay, there you are. Thank you, Delia. So we are facing some more complexity, which is nice again. Right, so Delia.
Hi, thanks. Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers before me. Thanks, Vladek. Right, I'm coming in at the last minute here, taking over from Eunice, who is unwell. I'm going to talk about Italy, and I'm going to talk about contamination and humor. Contamination of humor, obviously, in the public sphere across different media, from virtual spaces to real spaces, and above all, from humorous discourse to serious discourse. And I'd like to link today's talk with last week's talk, especially Salvatore Attardo and Anthony Mitzel, and their talk on memetics and the survival of memes, and linking that to Dawkins and his biological metaphor, which he brought into culture, and the DNA of memes and the survival of the fittest meme. Okay, this is not an internet meme, this is a photograph. I'd like you to go back to the 9th of August 2019. This is Richard Gere, who I'm sure you all know, and he's on a ship, an NGO rescue ship, just off the coast of Lampedusa in Sicily. The ship was called Open Arms. It had 147 asylum seekers on it, and the asylum seekers were without water and they were without food for 19 days. The reason for this was because at the time the Home Affairs Minister was Matteo Salvini. At the time we had a coalition government with the Five Star Movement and other players. But Salvini was the Home Secretary, and he had banned basically NGO ships, rescue ships, from landing in Italy. If they were to land, they would get a fine of roughly 45,000 euros. So the ship was out there. Now, Richard Gere just happened to be on holiday with friends in Tuscany. He heard about this. He flew down to Sicily with his son to Lampedusa. He found a fisherman who was willing to help him, lent him his boat. They both got on a boat, filled it with water, filled it with supplies, and went out to the to Open Arms, as I'm sure you may all know. Okay, that's the 9th of August 2019. The next day, Twitter, Giorgia Meloni. Who is Giorgia Meloni? Giorgia Meloni is the kind of counterpart, if you like, of Matteo Salvini. By the way, for the non-Italian people who don't know, Matteo Salvini is the leader of La Lega, a right-wing party in Italy. Giorgia Meloni is the leader of another right-wing party in Italy, Brothers, I was about to say Brothers in Arms, Brothers of Italy, Fratelli d'Italia. And she tweets above the photograph, everyone's courageous in their own backyard, although she uses the expression casa nostra, not cosa nostra, but casa nostra, our home. I would translate it with in our backyard. And then she addresses Gere. Why don't you go help Mexicans cross the border? Are you afraid they'll arrest you like they do over there with people who aid and abet clandestine immigration and not let you earn millions from your movies? You cardboard revolutionary. Okay, let's fast forward now to this year, to 2021, exactly a month ago, the 26th of October, if I'm not mistaken. So that same photograph I showed you a second ago becomes an internet meme. The migrant, they're on board the Open Arms. The migrant, the asylum seeker, is saying to Richard Gere, "Who are you?" And Richard Gere replies, "I'm Richard, I'm Buddhist, I'm a father, I'm American," which I'm presuming is going to be totally meaningless to people unless you were in Italy at the time, because this is a reference to a rally held by, here she is, Giorgia Maloney, in October 2019 in Rome. So 2019, 2021 today. The name of the rally was Orgoglio Italiano, so it's a kind of take on, sorry, Orgoglio Italiano, which means Italian pride, pardon. So it's a take on gay pride, of course. It was a rally against migration. It's against Islam, against LGBTQ plus rights. And at this rally, she, Maloney, famously said, "Io sono Georgia, I'm Georgia. Io sono una donna, I'm a woman. Io sono una madre, I'm a mother. Io sono cristiana, I'm a Christian." She also said that we will defend God, our nation, and the family against Islamization. The rest of you just deal with it, my translation. Okay, contamination. Back in 2019, two DJs known as M and J immediately brought out a techno trash video song of Io sono Georgia, I am Georgia. I'll spare you all of it, but I think I'd like you to listen to a bit of it just to get an idea.
Georgia, sono una donna, sono una madre, sono cristiana. Georgia, sono una donna, sono una madre, sono cristiana. Io sono Georgia, sono una donna, sono una madre, sono cristiana. Georgia, sono una donna, sono una madre, sono cristiana. È il gioco del pensiero unico. Ci devono togliere tutto quello che siamo, perché quando non avremo più un'identità e non avremo più radici, noi saremo privi di consapevolezza, incapaci di difendere i nostri diritti. Vogliono che siamo genitore 1, genitore 2, genitore 1, genitore 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, genitore 1, genitore 2.
I think you get the message there. I hope you get the message. It goes on like this, repeating things like genitore 1, which means parent 1, parent 2. I suggested that in identity cards, ID, we no longer put mother and father as parents, but parent 1, parent 2, so that single-sex couples are not discriminated against in any way. And later on in the video, she starts shouting out, blattering LGBT, homosexual, etc. I think you get the message. And so this video went totally viral very, very quickly, 2019. But contamination, so we've got this video going around online, and at the same time, Giorgia Maloney appears on TV, kind of promoting the video. So the way Giseninda and the group, one of the things we've been discussing when we met in person in Krakow was the fact that politicians are using humour a lot. And here she is on a TV show back in 2019.
Sono una donna, sono cristiana, sono una mamma, potrei dirlo pure io in effetti, ma oggi abbiamo con noi l'originale Giorgia Meloni. Genitore 1, genitore 2, genitore 1, genitore 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Io sono Giorgia, sono una madre, sono una donna, sono cristiana. queste produrre?
Okay, I'm sure you don't all understand Italian, but it's interesting. At one point, she's introduced by the journalist as the original Giorgia Maloney. In other words, not the Giorgia Maloney that we saw in the video, but the real, the real McCoy. This is Giorgia, the original. So we've got this kind of contamination. Okay, so let's fast forward to, before I fast forward to 2021, the video also went viral in Spain, where she also held a rally, and there is if those of you who are interested, you can find the Spanish version of Yo soy Georgia, yo soy mujer, etc., on the internet. Okay, let's fast forward to this year, 26th of October this year, a month ago today. Richard Gere comes to Italy. He arrives in Italy to testify against Salvini, to testify because, of course, Salvini got into trouble for keeping 147 migrants on a boat for 19 days without food and water. And Gere is over here to testify, 26th of October. And what's interesting is that Salvini accuses Gere of grandstanding, and Maloney accuses him of seeking visibility. She actually says he's just seeking visibility, as though 72-year-old Richard Gere, with an incredible back catalogue of films, whether you like him or not, one thing that he probably doesn't need is visibility. But that's what he got accused of by the two right-wing leaders. And this, again, generated a bunch of memes, such as this one from An Officer and a Gentleman. You see Giorgia Maloney being taken out of the factory by a very young Richard Gere. Here she is as Pretty Woman. And again, this is from a television program, Pretty Woman. On one side, we've got Julia Roberts with Richard Gere. On the other side, we have Giorgia Maloney with, Matteo Salvini, not quite Richard Gere, ladies, I'm sure you agree. And my favorite example is this one from the parody of Wikipedia. Richard Gere, born in Philadelphia, blah, blah, blah. If the bit that I've highlighted, after Mr. Goodbar, looking for Mr. Goodbar and so on, Richard Gere obtains international fame in 2021 thanks to the Open Arms trial where he testified against Salvini. Okay. Again, I wanted to thank Giorgia Maloney for the visibility that she's given me. And back to reality again. This is Giorgia Maloney's autobiography, which came out again in October, beginning of October. She called it Io sono Giorgia, I am Georgia. I couldn't find the meme. Maybe Jennifer be able to find it for me. I did scour the internet this morning, but I couldn't find it. But the book has been parodied. That cover appears in a version in which Giorgia Maloney has a tiny black moustache on her upper lip, resembling a well-known right-wing politician from the 30s and 40s, which I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. And finally this very morning, I opened the newspaper, La Stampa, a prestigious Italian broadsheet, and this is Antonella Viola. She is professor of pediatrics at the University of Padua and a well-known immunologist. Yesterday, Pfizer announced that their vaccine will be made available in Italy for all over Europe, but Italy, as from today, children from the age of 5 to 11 can be vaccinated with Pfizer jab. And she wrote an article in which she gave numbers of the number of children who've been intubated, infected, and who have died of COVID in Italy over the past year or so, 2 years or 18 months. I've lost all, like many of us, have no idea of time anymore. And contamination. At the end of the article, she writes, "Sono una donna, I'm a woman. I'm a mother, sono una madre, sono una scienziata, I'm a scientist." Again, picking up on Maloney and what she wrote and the Richard Gere meme, which appeared around a month ago. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Delia.
And that's a real picture, that's not a meme, of Richard Gere on board Open Arms, August 2019.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Delia. It was all
Yeah,
very interesting.
Where are we?
Which took us back to the idea of intertextuality. That adds a bit to our discussion, and memeosis as such, which wasn't so much present in the previous presentations today. So thank you to all the presenters. Now the discussion has unfolded here on the chat. So I suggest we start from some of these questions and comments, and the presenters could answer them, perhaps, and then we'll move on to other questions or comments that other people would have. So the first comment was from Don Nielsen, who was concerned about, basically about the wall. Agatha is not here to answer your wall question.
Go.
I actually am. I still am.
Oh, you're here. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, still
great.
something like 7 minutes.
All right, perfect. Right, so the question was about the walls and the Canadians.
But I'm sorry, I kind of seem to have missed it. Could you just read
right,
it out?
So
like it's possible.
Right, so the question was as follows. In the United States, Donald Trump, our 45th president, said that we need to have more immigrants from Norway. He also had a Muslim ban and tried to build a wall to keep out Mexicans and other Central Americans, but he didn't propose a northern wall to keep out Canadians. I suppose this is Don's contribution, Don's creative contribution to the wall.
And then,
it's a
what's
brilliant
going on here? What's going on here? To all three of you.
Right. No, any comments about the wall humor that Agatha can offer? The same question actually is addressed to John. The comment rather, but not question.
Comment concerning wall humor, as inspired by the missing northern wall in the United States.
Okay, there are three things here. There's the white versus darkness. There's the wall and the building wall against the immigrants. There's also this wall. This thing about the keeping out. You know, when foreign aid comes to someone, it doesn't go to the right places. It stays in the wrong places. It just seems that Trump out-Trumps everybody.
It's true. Although actually there is much competition around the world when it comes to.
Well, that's true. That's also true.
Unfortunately, nothing to laugh about actually.
Yeah. Yes, you're right.
Okay. All right, so let's move on then to the next comment, which was by John Davy, unless John wants to add something. Okay, John Davies, about the Druses. Normally the Druze are very well accepted in Israel. And then the question is whether was there something this cartoon produced in response to a particular situation? Was there a situation they responded to which allowed you to identify the person as a Druze?
Yes, this was the cartoon was written after a demonstration by Druze people in Israel. And that demonstration was a reaction to Israel's new nationality law or nation law that specified that Israel is the home nation of the Jewish people. So it was interpreted as being a more exclusionary law from, I don't know the earlier formulations, but that was something that it would be the homeland of all Jewish, but now it was something more like a Jewish nation state along those lines. So that's how the Druze that indeed were very well accepted in Israel reacted, as they would interpret it as being an exclusion of minorities like themselves.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. That explains it now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now, the next question is also to John, and that's perhaps a more complex question from Nastya Fyodotova. do you think the degree of humorousness of these two cartoons has in some way conditioned the different reactions to them? That's a tough one, I suppose.
Yes, and I think it's hard. I mean, I think neither of them are very funny, to be honest, but that's of course a personal way. But I think the latter one, that's actually a video, it was just a screenshot, is funnier, especially because of the Scrabble joke there, that you get lots of points. But at the same time, it's quite poorly executed because of the very blatant stereotype of the Orthodox Jewish guy together with this slur would take it a little bit off. So I don't think so often I would tend to agree that a more successful cartoon or successful humorous text would gain less reactions, or at least more defenders. But in this case, I think they were both not among the funniest. So there are other mechanisms at play here. I would suggest, at least.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll follow up maybe on this, because that's an interesting the degree of offensiveness, right? Because there's like a symbolic offense, an image, and then there is a verbal offense. Do you think there is this? Is it comparable? Do you think the image is more offensive, or the words are more offensive? What would you say?
I would say it's there is a combination here. I think it is the showing the very stereotypical depiction together with the slur word that is of Nazi origin, the Judenschwein, or the Norwegian equivalent. I think the combination of the two made it really, really offensive. And probably also it would be read as only offensive by everyone, while the cartoon of Netanyahu was, okay, this can be read as political criticism, and there's nothing suggesting that he's a Jew, especially, except our knowledge that he is, and thus many could read it as non-offensive.
Right.
Might be, at least.
Right. Yeah. Well, some people just react allergically to some images, right? So I thought maybe that's also okay. There's a comment here from Andrea Scarinci about the motto. This refers, I suppose, already to Delia's presentation, it seems to me. The same motto, I am this, I am that, right? I think it was also used in Spanish. Is that your comment, Andrea, if you're there?
Well, yes, as I said, it went viral. She also gave a talk in Spain, and yes,
yes,
whoops,
with Vox people.
The Vox people in Spain, yeah. So it also went, whoops, it also went viral. It also went viral in Spain. So yeah, if you look on YouTube, there are plenty of you hear Giorgio Meloni translating the four. That thing, I'm a woman, io sono una donna, blah blah blah, into Spanish as well. And I see Alan's asked, what's the relevance of io sono una donna? Alan, it was in October 2019. It was Italian Pride, and the rally was in juxtaposition with Gay Pride, and io sono una donna was a clear reference to trans rights. So she had it in for transsexuals, she had it in for LGBT, the whole rainbow, and that's quicker than saying them one by one, and Islam. I'm sono cristiana, and what else I've forgotten already. Yeah, she had it in for just about every
Una madre, because
sono una madre, because she's a biological mother. That's right. Sono una madre, biological mother. Sono cristiana. I'm not Islam. I'm not a Muslim, etc., etc. So, yeah.
Right.
Okay. So
okay.
I mean, each of those statements is in contrast and attacking some other group.
Absolutely. In fact, it was Italian Pride, and I think it's interesting as well that if you think of Italian, you don't normally say io sono Delia, you say sono Delia. It's not like English where you know, we are individualistic and so I and he and she. You remember when you first learned Italian, Alan?
Yeah.
We came here more or less at the same time. Yeah, one of the mistakes native speakers make is that we go around saying lui è, lei è. We put the pronoun all the time. It's unusual in Italian, yet she was saying io. Yeah, that use of io is really an interesting use of io, of Italian. She doesn't say sono Giorgia, io sono Giorgia, you know.
Yeah.
Very, very.
Yeah. You only use the pronoun for emphasis.
Just
yeah.
off, kind of.
Right. Okay, can we, I suppose the discussion was rather vivid there in the chat, but I haven't really found specific questions. Would anyone?
I think Will wants to ask a question. Will?
Oh, right,
Will?
right, yes.
Yes,
okay,
hi.
Hi, Will.
Hi.
Thank you for getting up early. Thank you.
Thanks for wonderful presentations and so current. I've always thought that all jokes are in some sense an in-joke, and I'm always interested in the social function and the way in which they draw us into a community that shares certain images, memes, stereotypes, and so forth. And what I think you've all done, all the presenters have done, have illustrated a technique, a strategy used by humorists, which is to take a barb, a weapon, a humorous weapon, and turn it against the user. Right, like the scrap iron becomes the Eiffel Tower, and sono una donna becomes a joke used against the original Maloney. So I'm wondering if there's a component of this that you can talk about that relates to the idea of in-jokes, the way a new joke suddenly becomes part of the conversation, or if not a conversation, it's the battle, the struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And this, I think, points back to Nick Holmes' work on, what does he call it? Comic disposition. And clearly the internet meme is the epitome of the in-joke, which if I find that funny, think of the memes, the internet memes that we pass on to our friends. We pass them on to people that we know are going to approve of what we're sending them. You have to be, especially somebody like yours truly, who often gets me things sent to her. We were listening last week to Kiki, who gave the example of the Sammy Davis joke, for example, and he discussed the Sammy Davis joke. So if I get that kind of joke, and I got 2 of them coming in today, because today is Black Friday, my phone is quite full of such jokes. I'm very, very careful who I forward those to. You know, so yeah, I don't want to lose my job just yet. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Useful then?
But, sorry?
Is Dawkins useful with regard to the idea of these memes become part of our genetic?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, he started the ball rolling, but there are so many scholars now, like Limor Schiffman and many others. Susan Blackmore, yeah, many others who've kind of taken Dawkins and brought it up to date. As well, can I just? I'm sorry, I don't know whether I'm answering the question here, but I'd like to go back to Christy and Giselinda too, who's written about this stuff. The internet meme, something that nobody's said yet, but I want to get it out there. This is totally not unoriginal. It goes back to Christy and again Giselinda, Elliot Oring, and people like that. The old joke. I don't know whether people tell each other jokes anymore, but you remember the joke cycles after a disaster or after something. they've now turned into internet memes. And Christy would always say that these jokes were made by the people from below. They would come, you know, they were born down there, and they would bubble up to the top, to the surface. And that's very much what internet memes are doing. And especially the examples that I gave, the Io sono Giorgia meme, you know, and all the ones criticizing Maloney and Salvini, certainly not coming out from politicians who share their viewpoints.
Okay, now maybe Razvan would like to respond to this comment or a question about reversals or inside joke or in jokes. Would you like to, Razvan?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the comments. I opened the chat and saw all of them while as they appeared. I like this idea that you take a weapon or the original joke and turn it into turn it against someone else. And I think this was the idea behind the dialogic action games I saw in here in my presentation. I also tried to look for other such dialogues, but I couldn't find. So probably there is something in a certain cartoon or a certain joke or meme that stirs people and stirs reactions. It's because some of the jokes or cartoons may disappear very quickly, while others still ask for some more responses. And probably this is something that is worth looking for.
Right. So your example then would be one of those that stays. Is that still alive in Romania? This joke?
Well, not now after 3 years, but at that time appeared in June, and I think it just got responses the whole summer long.
Ah, right. Okay, now thank you very much. I think John has left us already, so we won't be able to listen to his response. Now, would there be any questions from anyone else?
Oh, hello.
Oh, hi, Don.
I have a comment about the inside joke versus the outside joke. When a joke can be told by a person within a particular ethnicity or religion or social group, or it can be told from outside of that group. If it's told from outside of the group, it makes the group contract, get smaller, and sort of be defensive. If the same joke is told from inside the group, it makes the group get larger and get more powerful, because it's telling, if it's from the inside, it's telling people, we have this problem, we got to do something about it. If it's told from the outside, it's telling the people, you have this problem, and so there. So that's one reason it's very important that the joke teller from the inside or for the outside is not the same joke.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Absolutely. Yes, I buy this argument. Right.
So then, Don, could I ask you follow up a little bit? When an inside joke is reversed by someone outside the group, as it is in these cases that I've cited, what is the social mechanism? How does it work?
I'm sorry, the social mechanism of outside, being told from
When
outside.
somebody appropriates an inside joke like the scrap iron and turns it against the group from the outside, how does that change the equation?
Well, the way it works is, I think it's empowering versus disempowering. It's what it is. I think is us versus them. Okay, if you tell it from inside, the joke is us versus us. If it's told from outside, it's them versus us. And I think if it's told from the inside, it's empowering. It can be empowering. It doesn't mean, if it's empowering, that doesn't mean that it's easy. It means you got to change something. It's still a criticism, whether it's from the inside or from the outside. But if it's from the inside, the criticism is, this is how people view us. These are the stereotypes that the way people look at us. Maybe we can change that if we want to. If it's told from the outside, it's not about change and it's not about empowerment. It's about ridicule. I mean, I know I'm overgeneralizing, tremendously overgeneralizing, but I think that's the case.
Thanks.
Okay. There was this question in the meantime. I cannot, I'm trying to find the answer, but I don't know. About Alan's comments whether the Norwegian cartoonist was Jewish. Well, this I don't know. This would actually be useful to then identify this as an inside or an outside joke, but sorry, I don't know that. Anyone knows? Delia, do you know this? Do you remember whether the cartoonist was?
I don't remember.
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know.
I don't think so.
I was
And
published
certainly
in
the meme couldn't
in
possibly.
Norway.
That meme, the Scrabble, certainly wasn't somebody Jewish.
Right.
Unless, as Don says, it was aimed at a group of similar-minded people.
Right. Would we have any further questions or comments? It seems like that there is no one else volunteering with the comment. So in that case, we're about to close. Then shall I ask you, Delia, to close this?
Yeah.
I have one comment,
Don?
and that is, this was superb. This is very, very well done. Thank you all. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Don. That's very sweet of you. And for the people out there, the students, I see lots of students, Don Nielsen and Aline Nielsen, his wife, were in the 1970s, right, Don? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Before that.
Before that. Before that. You make me feel young, Don.
Oh, yes.
They invented, it was called Whimsy, the society, right? The first.
Yeah, we were the co-founders of the International Society for Humor Studies, and that's a biggie. As you know, you've had 2 conferences in Italy and Bertinoro. And by the way, could you say something about the Bertinoro conferences coming up in 2022?
I will say something about the Bertinoro conference coming up, if and only if the dreaded lurgy, COVID-19, SARS-2, in some way gives us an opportunity to hold the conference. We shall be holding the conference 27th of June to the 3rd of July 2022